much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on as a guest because you're just such a charismatic, interesting character person.
Oh, Gabby, stop it. Stop it.
A really interesting story that I think, it is going to be really key for people to kind of hear, because what we're kind of really focusing on this month and this month's kind of series from our contributors is honoring men. And I feel that men, particularly white men, are often viewed as just, in this privileged position and can be often missed from the conversations around EDI, particularly around intersectionality in EDI.
Yeah.
I can't just tell from looking at somebody who they are, what their beliefs are, etc. And I think it's really important that we hear the voices of men in our communities, in the events industry, and listen to them, because at the end of the day, and whether you like it or not, for me as a kind of EDI consultant, trainer, business owner, whatever you want to say, and somebody who is trying to make huge changes in the industry, if we are alienating and not listening to actually people who are in those positions of power and who also hold the purse strings, to me that seems ridiculous. But not just that from a kind of like commercial perspective. I think that if we're really trying to make people understand how important EDI is, and that EDI is for everyone, not just that visual representation that we see, or gender, women, etc., then everyone needs to be included in this conversation, which is why this month we're really highlighting that. And obviously you are an intersection. I don't think that's the correct term.
We'll go with it. We'll go with it. We'll roll with terms that we're just going to potentially make up that nobody else uses. It's fine.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It'd be really, but also not just that, but you actually have a really interesting story about how to encourage other men to perhaps be more open with their stories, because we can give the space for men to share, but actually, are they comfortable enough to share what they're feeling at any given moment, what their challenges are in this world today? So without further ado, let's get started. Let's maybe start.
Yeah, let's do it.
Your journey, a little bit around your history for those who don't know you, Michael.
Yeah, so for those that don't know me, hi, my name is Michael Newton. So I'm a manager at the event technology company Cvent. I've been with Cvent now close to 10 years. So
you look like 21. I don't understand.
I know. I finished primary school and then went straight to working at Cvent. That was how it went. They got me early. They got me very, very early. But in terms of my journey, I definitely had dealt with a lot in my life that probably a lot of people would have only had to deal with one of those kind of aspects. I grew up in a domestic abuse household. My mum left my dad when I was about 8. I came out as gay in my early 20s, so when I was 23, which is quite late when we look at people now, and I have friends that are like, wow, you came out very late, and I'm maybe on the grand scheme of things, but then as a result of coming out as gay, dealing with that, moving into the corporate world, and am I open about it? Do I go back in the closet? Kind of that kind of back and forth tussle. But then when I was 26, I found out that I was HIV positive. And that really, for me, was the trajectory of my journey, I guess, in D&I, as I had to deal with that. I struggled with my mental health as a lot due to it. I struggled with suicide as a result of finding out from that diagnosis. And it's been a journey, kind of one thing after another, almost in a weird way. People are probably like, why is Michael laughing at this? But it's one of those things where all of those different aspects of my life have really made me who I am, and have helped to kind of push me to want to achieve more, both personally, professionally. I mentioned, obviously, I've been at Cvent. I also run an LGBT charity where I help LGBTQ plus people become parents and support LGBTQ plus families. I've done advisory work for corporates around kind of the maternity and paternity policies when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, and also support a number of kind of other charities and organizations as well. But for me, as a gay man in the kind of corporate space, I think it's important that I I'm a voice for people that don't necessarily think they can have a voice, don't feel confident enough to have a voice. And, you know, if that means me putting myself out there and making myself feel uncomfortable so that somebody else can feel comfortable in their own skin, for me, that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. And because this is a conversation and a series over this month about strength and showing vulnerability, I'd like to kind of hop back a little bit, because you've obviously talked about those huge kind of things that have happened in your life that have shaped who you are today. But if you wouldn't mind maybe expanding a little bit of on that for our kind of viewers who and listeners who don't know exactly what you experienced. And I don't want you to have to relive your trauma, of course. I think it's a part and part of your story, the story, and of sharing vulnerability.
Yeah, so for me, grew up in South Wales. I'm the second of 5 children, and was just until my mum left my dad, it was quite a kind of traumatic kind of period. It would be us being verbally and physically assaulted by my father, watching my mum also go through that same thing. And for me, I remember kind of growing up, and I've talked about this in therapy, and I've talked about it with friends around for so many years. I honestly thought, oh, that's just how families are. And I would go to kind of friends' houses and be like, oh, this is weird. Okay, that's odd. And
What was odd?
Yeah, you know, it was odd seeing families being nice to each other.
Wow.
It was bizarre to me seeing parents having a loving relationship and families sitting around having dinners together, and they're not being screaming and shouting and things like this. And now, obviously, I'm a lot older, but I look back and I'm like, there's so many kids that still go through that, and through sharing my story, you know, most of what I talk about and my story is me as a gay man in the corporate world. However, there are men and women, I'm not going to specify that it's only women suffer from domestic abuse. There's a huge proportion of men that suffer as well, which is a much less talked about topic.
Yeah.
So for me, I hope that by kind of sharing, like, hey, my mum she had 5 kids. She was able to escape that cycle of mental and physical abuse that she had dealt with for years prior to me being born, to my brother who's 2 years older than me being born. You can escape it.
Yeah.
That you have that strength, irrespective of the amount that you've been pushed down by your abuser. You are able to find that strength and do what you need to do, and there are people around you that are, you know, willing to help. It is really about having that dialogue in that aspect.
Yeah, you're totally right. And thank God that there are people like yourself who are happy to openly talk about this, and that there are support mechanisms out there for people. And I'm sure we'll share some kind of resources in the show notes around that as well. But I think also what's interesting is that during the pandemic, domestic abuse increased, right? And as we're going through a lot of turmoil right now with the cost of living crisis, you know, I get very concerned about what is happening in households, and that people have somewhere where they can, somewhere to refer to or go, or someone to speak to, or just reading other people's or hearing other people's stories so that they're not alone is so important. So really thank you for sharing that aspect of, you know, an early part of your life in your story.
Yeah, you know, it's thankfully now there's so many more resources available where people are able to, you know, even if you go into restaurants and bars and things like this, you're able to give staff their kind of keywords, and they'll know to kind of help you, you know, whether, you know, even going down the route of things like trafficking and things like this. People are now more open, and they know, and I think the pandemic definitely heightened that and made it much more of a talking point for people to know that, hey, we don't have the resources for X, Y, and Z reasons, but we can utilize support from these different industries to be able to help us be able to provide this support. And it's as simple as going up to a bar. And I know a lot of nightclubs do this now. Like if you're on a date and you know the date isn't going well, or the person's being a bit of an aggressor or whatever, you can go up to the bar. And I think most of them say, hey, I'd like to speak to Angela. And
I was wondering if we were allowed
fast
to
off note
say
to take
that,
them.
because I was like, are we then giving away the key word? And now people are going to be like, every time we hear Andrew at the bar, we're going to be like, what's going on?
But they now know to kind of take you to kind of the back room and kind of get that person removed and to kind of help you get in a cab and things like this. So I think the fact that it is becoming a talking point and it is something that's at the forefront of people's minds is fantastic now.
And you know what, as well, I think like being able to be a bit more open and starting to talk about these issues is helping to remove some of the shame from that. And I think a lot of the issue of being vulnerable is also is the perceived shame that or the shame that you might genuinely feel, or the shame of knowing that others know that you have gone through this, which is why the openness and the hearing different stories is so important. But I mean, that's obviously not the only thing that you've lived through. You started talking more obviously about your journey for when you obviously came out, and then obviously when you found out you had HIV and into the corporate world. So we can refer back to that as well, if you're happy to, Michael.
Yeah. So my coming out wasn't, I was very lucky. I didn't have issues with friends or with family. My siblings are very, very different to me as a person and personality-wise. I'm a bit kind of like, well, what does that mean? And they kind of had questions, but they were never kind of offensive or rude about it. My mum was, I think most gay men who have come out to their mothers will know that their mums will be like, oh yeah, that, most anyway. Oh yeah, like I've known that for years. It's like, you want to tell me? So I was lucky in that respect, because I do have friends who it was the flip. The parents were like, get out of the house, we're just don't, like, you're out of the will, we never want to see you again. And they've gone on now, thankfully, to have loving relationships, children, things like this. And what's sad about it is that those parents who grew up with that individual for 16, 18, 20, however old you are when you come out, they're now missing out on such a beautiful part of those people's lives. It's like, I look back at my coming out, and if my mum had that same reaction, she would never have seen the amazing things I've achieved over the last 13 years with, being the first person in my family to graduate from university, having a very successful career, being relatively, it sounds cringy to say, but being relatively well known within the industry as well, and getting to do kind of cool things like this and winning awards for doing things like this as well. And I know that she's so proud of me for achieving those things, and I'm glad that she's able to be along that journey kind of with me. And it's upsetting to know that so many families miss out on those amazing things just because they can't get over their own kind of bigoted ideologies of what homosexuality means and what society in a certain time period said homosexuality was and meant, because it's really not what that is anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think, not to give parents credit, because it's not what I'm trying to say, but I think sometimes a lot of concerns for parents are that they're worried for you that you're not going to have the opportunities to achieve what you want to achieve in your life. That's also part of the concern as well. Now, you're obviously living proof that you can go off and achieve and do wonderful and amazing things and win awards, and which hopefully will put other parents' minds at ease when perhaps their son or daughter, comes out. And that's also an important element of that story. And as society becomes more accepting, I suppose, and more open to people's different, gender identities or sexuality, hopefully those will alleviate those worries and make it a lot easier for young people to come out.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's funny you say accepting when you kind of say that. I know, it's, you have to, because one of the things I always hate is when people are like, oh, society is becoming so much more tolerant of LGBT people. I'm like, I don't want to be tolerated. Like, no, like I'm me. Like, you shouldn't have to
tolerating Marmite.
Yeah, I'm like, you should have to tolerate me. Like, come on. But no, I agree with you. It is about kind of, we're taking slow steps. I know people get irritated by me when I say this, but like, unfortunately, it is slow steps. We're not going to see drastic change overnight. We do still have situations with, lawmakers across the world. We see a lot of it happening in the US now at the moment, with, the Don't Say Gay bills going through and stuff like that. And we're seeing a lot of that thought process moving into the UK, unfortunately, that we do have to make sure that we are still fighting the fight, and that we have kind of allies like yourself and the rest of the crew that you have at Diverse Speaker Bureaus, and we're having these conversations in sessions like this, at big conferences, that we're having those conversations around what does it mean to create a diverse workforce that's inclusive, that is creating a sense of belonging for everybody.
And I think we need to be really mindful as well that just because we all enjoy I'll keep doing quotation marks, I'm really sorry. We enjoy gay culture, i.e. we like to get dressed up and we're happy to fly flags, but then we're still seeing homophobic attacks. Actually, homophobic attacks are increased in the streets, actually. Yeah. So it's not things are getting better just because we're happy to wave a flag and put a flag logo or do an LGBTQ or pride.
I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, actually, with Shanali. And we were talking about what does it mean to be an ally? And it was like something that really bugs it's one of my biggest bugbears in kind of corporate world, is when during Pride Month people wear the Pride lanyards and like, I'm an ally. I'm like, heck off. I'm like, you can't just be an ally between the 1st of June and the end of June. Like, you don't clock in and clock out. It's a year-round, every year thing. And if you're going to be an ally for the LGBTQ plus community, you have to be an ally for the whole spectrum. You can't, you see people, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment around trans rights and trans people and things like that. You can't say, hey, I support the lesbians, the gays and the bis, oh, not the trans. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. You support you're an ally for the entire spectrum. I think it's important to make sure that people are aware that you don't clock in and clock out of allyship. And the same thing goes for, supporting ethnic communities and any other form of minority. You support that community and you're a voice for that community every day of the year for the rest of your life. It's not a, oh, hey, like I want to show my support for the Black community, but only in October when it's Black History Month. Exactly. Like that isn't how it works.
Or International Women's Day. Oh, but we've got days and months for everyone. Like we're definitely like doing the right thing. Yeah, it's not enough, quite frankly. Yeah. But in an earlier conversation that we had, Michael, you actually brought up about family and how you don't choose your family. Yeah. But actually, as you get older, you can choose your family. It doesn't have to be blood relatives. That can be your community. That can be your close friends. I think how easy, and I'm not asking you to answer for all men or gay men in this scenario, but how easy is it for men to formulate their own communities or families if they perhaps don't have that somewhere else in their lives? Is that something that you found quite easy to do, or?
It's something that I definitely struggled with in terms of having something that I refer to as my chosen family. I always had lots of groups of friends and I always had kind of people around me. Yeah. But it wasn't until I met my friend Tuvia in 2015, and he really was the person that kind of brought this kind of chosen family together. He's Jewish, and it started with us all getting together to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And then we would get together to celebrate kind of all of the other holidays. And this chosen family that kind of started out as 5 or 6 adults and a couple of kids grew to 10 adults and then more kids, and then grew to 20 or 30 adults and then kind of 15 or so kids. And now we all come together. Like I'm not Jewish, but I celebrate all of the Jewish holidays with my chosen family because he brings us all together multiple times a year. We do dinners and drinks, and we all get involved in the prayers and the ceremonialness of all of these Jewish holidays. And it's adults who come from every different type of I work in events. He's a lawyer, there's other lawyers, there's doctors, there's teachers, there's unemployed people, and there's all these different children. Some are blood relatives, some are adopted, some are fostered. Some people are white, Black, Asian, it's such a rainbow of a family, and everybody there's no prejudice. Everybody just comes and everyone accepts everybody for who they are. And that even goes down to the kids. The kids now take that discussion that the adults have around what it means to be accepted. I'm going to do the quotation points as well. Accepted within this rainbow-colored family, and they take that to school and they educate their teachers and they educate the other students. Sometimes, unfortunately, because of the way that the education system works, that kid who's doing good by correcting maybe a teacher or maybe a student on language or questioning why there isn't, this or that kind of being represented around the school, that kid ends up getting into trouble. But then the parent kind of goes in and is like, well, actually, no, my kid's not in trouble. It's the teacher that's in trouble because they haven't. So maybe you need to sort out your shop internally before you start questioning the customers, kind of thing.
So true. But what do you actually personally get out of having this wonderful rainbow family, as you've called it? What does it do for you?
It really warms my soul. As we'll probably touch on, I've dealt with lots of issues with my mental health and things like this, and we touched on kind of my upbringing originally. For me, it really does allow for me to know that everything I do is good. Everything I do is fine. I'm fine. I don't need to change who I am for anybody. We've known each other for many years now, Gabby. I am a lot to deal with at the best of times. I am a lot to deal with. I have a very big personality. I'm loud, I'm brash. But this family that I have over the years that we've all been together allowed for me to know that I am fine exactly the way that I am. And that's the message that we're sending to these kids by kind of having all of these kind of people come together. And they also make me a better person because they allow for me to pick their brains about things that are going on in my life and get their advice. And they ask me, and I'm like, you're older than me and you're much more successful. Like, why do you want my advice? And things like this. So, a little bit of like imposter syndrome kind of pops in. I'm like, why would this partner or law firm want my advice on something that they're dealing with at work? So yeah, it really does. And it's the same when you surround yourself with good people, and people that you trust and you love. It just allows for you to be authentically kind of who you are. And part of being a part of this family has allowed for me to kind of come into work every day and just be unashamedly me. I don't change who I am when I go into work. I maybe change myself a little bit for kind of client meetings and things like that, because you have to be adaptable. But in terms of the way that I interact with my seniors, people who report into me, people that are entry level into the business, I act no differently to how I would inside work to outside work. It's for me, I'm the exact same person.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. You touched a little bit earlier on when you found out that you had HIV and whether you wanted to share that in your kind of workplace. Why were you hesitant?
I was hesitant because of essentially what society had made me believe having HIV was. I was born in '86, and obviously that was the height of the AIDS epidemic. So, kind of growing up, it had always been something that was around. I wasn't necessarily aware of it because I was very, very young. But then in the 90s, you started getting movies like Philadelphia, Dying Young, things like this that were centered around characters who had AIDS. And what you saw was very tragic. You didn't see a happy ending or a happy kind of story. It always really ended with death, to put it bluntly. And then when you have kind of TV shows, you have HIV storylines on, EastEnders had a huge HIV storyline, which was probably the happier of all of the HIV storylines they've ever kind of been kind of anywhere.
Which is strange for EastEnders, because she's a depressing program.
Exactly, and it's on EastEnders. Who would have thought? But they were kind of the stories that I kind of grown up with, and you still see kind of the fear mongering around HIV. So in my head, when I got the diagnosis, there was a lot of stuff going through my head kind of in that what was probably just a few minutes, but felt like hours of all these kind of questions and thoughts running through my head. But kind of the ultimate kind of loudest voice was that this was going to kill me, that this was how I would die, that I would, you know, waste away, I'd be sick all the time, I'd be on all of these medications, I'd be in and out of hospital, and that just isn't the reality of it. You know, because of what society and, you know, other people had kind of painted of this illness, you know, we spoke of before. When I kind of got that diagnosis and I kind of went through the motions of that day, the thing for me was, oh, well, I don't want to have to go through this trauma. I don't want my friends or my family to have to go through this trauma. I was like, suicide, like that's the only way that I won't have to kind of go through this. And, you know, I'd got home from work that day and I sat in the lounge. I had a bottle of vodka. I had, I think, 6 or 7 packets of painkillers that I bought on the way home. And I literally sat there and I wrote a suicide note about, you know, why I was doing it and how I was sorry and all of this kind of stuff. And I sat there just kind of staring at this note, staring at this vodka, staring at these painkillers. And I don't know how I managed to kind of pull myself out of it in that moment, but I managed to kind of be like, hey, Michael, like, sleep on it. If you still feel the same in the morning, do it in the morning. And then I kind of took a sleeping tablet and like went to bed and woke up the next morning and was like, Michael, you absolute idiot. Like, what, like, and that moment for me was such a wake-up call in my entire life of I need to be more in control of these things, and actually I need to find out what this means. So that the day after I went into work, I was working for Yelp at the time, and I sat down with each manager in office. I think we had 6 or 7 managers in the office at the time. And I told each of them about the diagnosis I'd got the day before. And I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know how I'm going to be dealing with this or what it's going to mean from a medical professional standpoint, like how we deal with this, but I need your support. And all of them were fantastic. In a weird flip of roles, a couple of the managers actually started to cry and I had to kind of comfort them. I'm like, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. I think we'll find out soon, kind of thing.
Gosh, I totally I get that though. I get like quite emotional like that. If you told me, I probably would have started crying.
And for me, because I realized it's tough because I don't ever think I felt shame about my HIV. I think in my early days, I think I felt embarrassment. Because it, like, HIV and AIDS is such a taboo topic. And it's one of those things where gay people specifically, and I'm not going to blanket brush kind of every gay man, but a lot of the gay community still have a lot of the thoughts. And I'm talking young gay men as well. People.
I was going to ask that. That generation.
People kind of my generation still have a lot of that stigma that was associated with AIDS before they were even born.
Wow.
Stories
and media and all of that, and how embeds into your brain and the way people just believe without doing their own kind of. I'm not saying doing your own research, that's like a cheesy comment, but you know what I mean.
But it's true. You know, people making a conscious effort to understand things that are going on in our community. Like for you, Gabby, as a Black woman, I imagine you make a very conscious effort to understand what is going on in my community. And I think it's important that people understand what is going on within their community, so that, you know, because when I found, you know, and I always kind of caveat what I say about kind of, I'm like, if I hadn't have got HIV, I cannot say that I wouldn't be one of those people. I like to think that I wouldn't be.
Interesting.
I like to think that I wouldn't be, but I can't say for definite that, you know, if somebody, because I've had this before, and I'm very open about it. I do it's on like my dating, it's on my Tinder profile and Hinge and Bumble and Grindr, and like I'm on everything, so you can find me anywhere.
This is not hard. We're trying to get you a day here.
On a dating app, look for Central London. You'll find me on there if you set the age range for 35. But I've messaged guys and they'll be like, oh hey, like how are you? And they've been like, oh my god, I can't believe you've messaged me, you're HIV, as if I would ever. And that's probably one of the more polite versions of messages that I've received. But it's we as a community, and I'm gonna take gay community. I don't want to kind of speak for lesbians, bisexuals, trans, queers, etc. because my experience is as a gay man. I can't talk the experience of other people within the community. We can't expect other people and other groups and the wider world to treat us as equals until we treat ourselves as equals. So we can't, to a certain degree, I know some people are going to backlash on this comment a little bit, we can't expect to have full equality within society until we have equality within our community. That's my thoughts on it anyway. We have to be willing to take everything as everybody comes within our community, whether it is HIV, whether it's AIDS, whether it's some other kind of illness that, whether you're fat, ugly, muscly, tiny, wherever you fall. We just need to be accepting of everybody so that then the outside world see, oh, look at the connection within that group. We want that. We want to be a part of that.
I 100% agree with that, because when we had these discussions around EDI, you're always talking about other communities, how to support other communities without actually looking at our own. And I still need to educate myself about the Black community. I do not know everything about the Black community. I'm mixed race. I have a very different experience. There's colorism that does exist. I totally get that. And I can't speak for all of the Black community. So I have to educate myself about my own community and be open to not knowing everything and learning and hear other people's stories. It's not always about hearing other community stories or underrepresented people's stories. You need to learn about yourself as well, in your own community,
Yeah, and for me, I can only talk about my own lived experience. And, I by no means consider myself an expert on diversity, inclusion, belonging, and things like this. However, I'm an expert in my experience. And other people may have similar experiences to mine and can take away things that I've done and knowledge from my experience and represent it to themselves. So I think that's always something I think we need to be aware of, is that when people like yourself, like me, like many of our social circle that we know, we're not talking about everybody's lived experience. We're talking about our lived experience and what we have done to expand that within the community. But these are things that I think you could take away to help you on your journey.
100%. I'm going to go back to where you brought up how you spoke to your managers when you at Yelp. And obviously it's an incredibly vulnerable position to be in and put yourself in. It takes a lot of strength, I think. Do you think there's a kind of stigma against showing vulnerability in the workplace, but particularly as a man and particularly within leadership? Do you think there's a stigma to that? Or do you actually see quite a lot of men, colleagues, friends, being quite comfortable about being vulnerable in the workplace?
Yes and no.
Okay.
To that one. So I think that now I've always worked within sales. I've always worked within kind of sales for different organizations. And I think there's definitely how do I put this? There's definitely a viewpoint that a man in sales needs to be kind of ruthless. Needs to be hard as nails, like, oh lads, let's go get whiskey after work and maybe a cigar, and like we'll pop to like spearmint rhinos or that kind of.
Because I was about to say something similar. I was like, Gabby, don't say that.
That's very much kind of the vibe that I think a lot of people. But again, it's because of how society is painted that you look at movies like Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Things like people, and then people say that, like, oh my God, it must be so much fun working sales. I'm like, it's stressful. It's like, it's none of that.
Once a year if we're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, it was when I made that decision, because it was 3 male leaders and 4 female leaders that I told. And the female leaders were very empathetic. And I'll kind of come back to that in a second. We're very empathetic in terms of their responses. In general, I think they kind of teetered between being empathetic and being sympathetic, and there's obviously a significant difference between the two. The 2 of the 3 male leaders, I could see felt very uncomfortable. The one male leader who I'm still in contact now, a fantastic guy named Liam Crooks, he was, out of everybody, probably the best person that kind of responded. You know, he was very empathetic. He was like, what do I need to do to help you? It wasn't about the business or the impact that it might have in kind of other ways, shapes, or form. It was, Michael, what do I as a leader need to do to help you get through this? And I think when it does come to leadership, because and again, I don't want to blanket with you. I think male leaders in general are fearful of empathetic leadership, because I think a lot of the times empathy is seen as a weakness within leadership. And like, again, this goes for female leaders as well. I think I think leadership in general, I would say probably like 80 to 90% of leaders probably see empathetic leadership as a weak form of leadership, because it means you have to be vulnerable. You have to let down that wall. You have to let down that guard, and you have to let people in that are, and I hate using this term, probably beneath you within the organization. You know, they're your subordinates, and they're probably your subordinates and things like this. And a lot of the conversation will go around, well, why would I share my personal story and my personal trauma with people at work? They're people that I work with. They're not my friends. They're not this, they're not that. I'm like, they could be.
Exactly.
You know, just because somebody is a subordinate to you doesn't mean that what they could contribute to you in terms of support is any less than paying £300 an hour to a therapist on Harley Street. You know, I remember when I did my keynote for Cvent, the volume of people that reached out to me at every level, you know, senior, you know, SVPs, VPs who I had never even had contact with, because they fall in different divisions, they're different parts of the organization. I don't have to interact with them. Reaching out to say things like, you know, oh my God, like I went through X. Hearing your story has made me realize X. Oh, I have a family member who has HIV. You sharing your story has made me realize we need to have a conversation about as a family. And then coming back and like, we spoke about it as a family. It's actually brought us closer, and things like this. Having that.
This is when you do this stuff, right? Those moments to feel like
and
it's someone's life, you know, which sounds massive.
For me, I think since I did my talk for Cvent, which was February 2020, so just before the pandemic, a great timing. I feel that people that do work within my team work harder for me, because they know that it is, you know, if they are struggling with their mental health one day and they need to take an afternoon off, they know that there's not going to be like a backlash from me. They're just like they'll slack me like, hey Michael, like today I just can't. I'll be like, that's cool, when you're back in, just submit PTO and we're golden. If anything comes through, send it my way or put me in your out of office, I'll handle it. Do what you need to do today. And that for me as a leader is the biggest reward that I can give back to them, is knowing that nothing's too big. You know, they can come to me with things that are happening professionally, they can come to me with things that are personally. I'm not going to judge. You know, I'm there to be a soundboard for them if that's what they need. And that for me is probably one of the biggest rewards of being able to be a leader is that I can make that kind of impact of change within somebody's life. You know, you don't need to be an advice giver to make an impact on somebody's life. Sometimes, like, we have 2 ears for a reason. 2 ears and 1 mouth. Like,
and you know what, as well, Michael, it's interesting because when I am consulting with clients on the best kind of course of action with regards to what they need to do from an EDI perspective, so whether that is having workshops, whether that's doing training or whatever that is, we always had this conversation about where should leadership be involved, what should leadership be doing? And I'm saying you cannot expect your workforce to have to attend a workshop and be honest, open and vulnerable if you're not prepared to do the same.
Yeah. No, completely. 100. I couldn't agree with that statement more. It's that openness at every level is so important, you know. And I'm glad that I work for a company where having those open dialogues is promoted. You know, we have our C-suite share personal anecdotes about kind of their lives and things like this. And it kind of, you know, we have a lot of, you know, I think a lot of incentives and initiatives, especially when it comes to D&I, it's, it needs to come from the top down. I actually really disagree with that statement.
Same.
I think it needs to come from the top down, the bottom up, or it needs to go from the middle up and down as well.
Agreed.
So it needs to come from 3 different sections. So from the top, it's coming down. From the bottom, it's going up. But from the middle, it's going up and down. And I think that is how you make change.
Agreed. I totally agree with you on that when it comes from all areas of the business. I think the key reason why people tend to say that is because you may have people from the bottom up doing their piece and people in the middle, but then if you don't have people top, then it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
They're a fundamental piece of this puzzle. But yeah, it's just such an interesting conversation. I'm so glad that we're starting to see, and I'm even starting to view posts on LinkedIn, read blogs, just see people talk, and even Twitter, and just seeing people talking, men in particular, a lot more about sharing and showing their vulnerability as leaders in the workplace. And I was having a conversation with somebody else the other day about how soon these kind of like operational and strategic actions or whatever we do in the workplace that keep the business ticking over can soon be taken over by technology, AI. What's the one thing that's going to keep humans in a job? It's being a human. So having those skills where you're able to listen, as you've said, Michael, where you're able to show empathy, where you're able to show vulnerability, to have that that work environment and culture where everybody is willing and open to share. And as you said, people have more loyalty, and that sounds a bit but people do have more loyalty. As you said, your staff now feel like they can come or your team feel like they can come and talk to you, and you're going to understand because you've already shown them that you do get it and you do have empathy, and that's built. And retaining employees, that's going to be a key part of that as well. Yeah,
you know, I think again, you know, we've spoken about that kind of multiple times. You know, it is just really cementing into people that vulnerability isn't a weakness, and I think that's ultimately kind of where it kind of comes down to, is that if you're vulnerable, irrespective of where you sit within the organization, you know, that vulnerability is your biggest strength. You know, if you're able to use that vulnerability in a positive way, you know, I look at, you know, all these different things that have happened in my life, and my life could have taken a very different path. And I'm very grateful that the path that I'm on is the path that I'm on. And that's thanks to, you know, I have a friendship group that I grew up with in school. We've known each other since we were like 6 years old. So we've all been friends since we were about the last 30 years. And we have a WhatsApp group and we speak every day. And having that group of girls, and then my other group of friends from university, and then my chosen family, to help keep me on a path that could have ended up very differently. You know, I'm incredibly grateful for, but it's because I've allowed for myself to be vulnerable and to open up to these people. That has made it easier for me to be accepted, and to continue to go on to kind of strength to strength to strength. And I think once leaders specifically realize that it isn't a weakness, and once leaders realize that when their teams open up to them and being vulnerable, and they're cool, calm, and collected about it. Because I think that's also something that freaks leaders out is, well, what do I do if somebody comes to me and they say, I'm struggling with my mental health, or they text and like, hey, like, I've, in a previous role when I was manager, I had somebody text me like, I tried to kill myself last night, I'm in hospital, I'm not gonna be in work today. And I've had, you know, people who their partners have called to be like, hey, they're not gonna be in today, don't want to get into details, but we're in hospital, I'll catch up with you later. And I'm like, you do you, I will keep, you know, we have to be strength for those people as leaders.
There is a skill to this actually, and like for some people it comes very naturally. Like for yourself, it might come very naturally, but actually, we do kind of training, if you will, I guess you can kind of call it that, on how to have sort of like conversations that can be challenging. How do you address somebody who's perhaps coming to you and sharing something that's quite sensitive, and how do you approach that? Because also, this is still a professional environment at the end of the day. So as much as you want to be able to show their empathy, there's definitely some skills to make sure the person feels safe in that environment to share that. And for you, as you said, it's not about giving advice. Sometimes it's just about listening and then stepping away, reflecting, and then going to the right person, whether that is HR, whether that is an in-house counselor or whoever that is, seeking the advice to best go back to that person so they get the best support experience out of having that conversation with you. You know, as much as the showing the empathy is key, also the listening and not trying to, as you said, offer that advice or tell people what to do in those circumstances is also really an important skill to have.
You hit the nail on the head with that one, in terms of being honest about not knowing the answers. Like that's important. Like if you don't know, and I like to think I know a lot of the answers. I don't a lot of the time, you know, probably because I'm a bit cocky, but I don't know a lot of the answers. So for me to be able to kind of say to people, hey, listen, like, you know, you're like, I'll give you an example, you know, kind of somebody comes to you, you sit there, you listen 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, whatever it takes. Thank you, you know, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm not sure what we need to do here, but leave this with me. I am going to go and find out how we can help you.
There we go.
It's as simple as that. It doesn't need to be this long-winded additional conversation. It doesn't. The one thing that I think, and this is something that I've definitely dealt with leaders previously, is that there doesn't need to be follow-up questions. This is
discomfort though. We as humans discomfort to cover how we're feeling.
It's such a human reaction. But it's something that even for me, even though I talk about this, and I'm like, hey, like here's some like top tips and like things not to, I have to catch myself not going in with a question, and I'm like, no, Michael, don't do it.
Or I'm very opinionated and I have to express my opinion, and because I love expressing myself, and I'm like,
exactly,
Gabby.
And then you also go down the route of being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with this. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. Like, and then you inadvertently end up making it about you instead of that other person. It's really about making sure that you keep your follow-up short, you keep it simple, so that person knows that you are there to help them, but you are not there to pry any. They have told you what they feel comfortable with telling you. If they wanted to tell you other things that are probably to do with questions you have, they would have told you when they were speaking to you. So once somebody has finished kind of laying probably something very uncomfortable out to you, because it's, you know, naturally as humans, I hate, which is going to sound weird given that I do a lot of this, I hate talking about like my emotions, and I hate kind of going to people for help, and I'm kind of like very like, oh, I can deal with it myself, because that was how I was brought up. I was brought up to do this stuff by myself, and to problem solve and to not need help and stuff like this. But letting that person know easily with, hey, you know, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what the answers are here, whether it's personal answers, professional answers, kind of whatever it is. However, if you give me till the end of the week, I am going to go away and I'm going to speak to people confidentially. I won't give your name out so people don't, so nothing's spread. I think that's important, that they know that their name isn't going to be spread around HR, counsellors, other senior leaders, things like this. But I will come back to you confidentially by the end of the week with what we have as resources that are available to you.
Yeah, perfect.
But also, you know, I have an open door. You can come and speak to me anytime that you need to. Just let me know what you need from me and I will help you. I think it's that easy of a response. And it needs to be that simple.
I'm so glad we didn't obviously plan to discuss exactly
how
this goes. I'm so glad how we've managed to share that, because actually that probably is a key thing that people are like, what actually do we say in those scenarios? I don't know what to say. So I'm so glad we've got to that point where we managed to cover that a little bit. So thank you for bringing us in on that. And I think I just want to wrap up really by asking what is next for you, so we can end on a high, end on a positive note, or you might want to share a piece of advice for perhaps a man who is struggling at the moment to, or you can do both.
Okay, we'll do both. We'll do both.
I do both actually, but as I was saying, I was actually
so next for me, World AIDS Day is coming up on December 1st. So you know, I've got a lot of speaking engagements like this kind of lined up for that. Again, just to make sure that we're continuing to kind of break down that stigma, as well as, you know, helping LGBT people in the workplace know that they have a voice and they have a place and it is safe for them, and that there are kind of resources and things like this.
Straight people also need to realize this.
Straight people need to realize as well, you know, I think a lot of the time people do think, oh, you know, these talks, you know, whether it's wherever it is on kind of the diversity and inclusion kind of spectrum, it's, oh, this is for the LGBT community, this is for the Black community, this is for Actually, no. A lot of this stuff is to educate the people outside of those communities.
Exactly.
Like, I don't, you know, I probably do need some education when it comes to LGBTQ plus at large, and maybe even around kind of HIV and things like that. But a lot of it is to get a base level of knowledge to that outside group. It's not about educating the people you know, the people that are part of that community that comes to these sessions are probably there because they want something to make themselves feel more comfortable. They want to hear another voice, they want to hear another experience to make sure that what they've experienced and what they feel is validated. For a lot of the content, a lot of the talks I do, it's really for those outsiders that are looking in and kind of like, oh, what's going on over there, and that type of thing.
And also, obviously, when we had that first kind of like catch up before this interview around actually more heterosexual people, I don't know if it's in the London or in the whole of the UK actually, now have
within the UK, in the last year, more heterosexual people were diagnosed with HIV than LGBT. Which is the first time in history. So it's very kind of interesting from that perspective as well. And I think that's definitely something that's opening up that conversation a bit more. In terms of for men, in regards to advice, you know, I think the biggest bit of advice that I can give to men would be, you know, emotions aren't scary. You know, you shouldn't feel ashamed or embarrassed because you feel a certain way. You know, we all have crappy days at work. Just a given. Just how life is. It's not embarrassing. It's not embarrassing to feel shame because this happened or you got upset or like, if you can hone in and own those emotions, that really is going to be your biggest strength. That is what's going to help you kind of get through it, not end up in a negative mental headspace. It's what's going to allow for you to push yourself. Because for me, when I have those kind of crappy days, and I still have those kind of, you know, low mental health days where I wake up and I'm like, today is not the day. But then I go back to how I was that evening when I found out about the HIV, and I'm like, if I can get through that, I can get through today. Like, if I can deal with that and come out stronger, I can get over the fact that I have, you know, like today I'm just like not feeling it, because I'm like, people are reliant on me. And I don't want to let those people down. Like, that shouldn't be kind of the sole logic behind it. But for me, whenever I do have those days, I look back at how I felt in that moment and in that day, and I pinpoint it. And that for me is what gives me that strength to know, okay, let's carry on, let's go, let's do what we need to do. We're going to kick today's ass. And often those days end up being my most productive days. They end up being the best days I've had, whether it's professional, whether it's personally. They just end up being great days. And I feel an even bigger sense of accomplishment because I know how low I was when I woke up, and then to start at a 1 and be at like a 9 at the end of the day, it's a huge achievement for you. Even if you start at 1 and you end up at 4, that's still a huge achievement because you've been able to pull yourself out of that rut.
And I think the ability to start being able to open up and be honest also helps kind of solidify and bond relationships to create that support network around you, so you're not feeling you're having to deal with everything alone, right? Because if we keep everything to ourselves, we put on that face of everything's fine, and we're never sharing, it just twists and rots inside of you, you know. So if we can be more open, whether that's with one person, whether that's with a stranger online, whoever it is, a family member, best friend, community, you're going to build up your support mechanisms, and each time it's just going to be a little bit easier, and hopefully be supported to get through these moments that
and like you just said, it's rotting and knotting you up on your insides. So by allowing for yourself to just continue to go through that churn of negativity, it's only affecting you. You're the only person. And that for me was what I was able to kind of get myself out of, was like, actually, no, I'm only negatively impacting myself. Why would I want to continuously have this negative effect on myself? And I think if you can get your head around that, that's kind of a huge kind of undertaking for you. But yeah, like you said, it's you that's being affected by you.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for your time. I had a really
thank you for having me, Gabby.
With you today. I really have. So thanks for being so open and honest and sharing. And hopefully some people will really be able to take away 1 or 2 bits and pieces that might change their relationship, change how they feel, how they think, how they want to show up in the world, in their workplace, with their families. And we'll be sharing resources as well, and show notes, everything for people to be able to reach out and find support if they need to. But thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, Gabby. Thanks, everyone.